What's going on, people? Welcome to the King's Monologue and thank you for joining me. Now, I'm recently back from a relatively short trip to Egypt, and what surprised me when I went there was that the highlight of my trip ended up being this site that this video is about today. Have you heard of the Serapeum? Now, if you haven't heard of the Serapeum, no big deal, because I hadn't heard of it either. I know some of you will say, oh, what kind of an amateur Egyptologist are you? But I genuinely hadn't heard of the Serapeum before I went there, and my tour guide made a really big deal about it. It was like, you need to go to the Serapeum, like it's really amazing. And I'm not gonna lie to you, it was amazing. Many of you have clicked on this video because you've maybe seen the thumbnail, you're not sure what to expect, and I'm gonna tell you right now, it's not clickbait. I personally believe if we, I wouldn't say reassess, but if we really analyze what the Serapeum is, we're looking at a site that potentially we should be talking about alongside some of the great monuments such as the pyramids of Giza. Now, if you want to know more, stay tuned.
Beneath the sands of Saqqara, far from the sunlight that shaped an empire, lies a hidden world, an underground labyrinth hiding mysterious monuments carved with impossible precision. Here, in chambers cut deep into bedrock, these colossal stone boxes weighing well over 60 tons each on average continue to baffle researchers. This is the Serapeum of Saqqara, one of ancient Egypt's most puzzling and extraordinary engineering achievements. First, let's address the issue of the two Serapeums.
The Serapeum of Saqqara, which is the one that I went to, and the Serapeum of Alexandria. Now, when it comes to Alexandria, we already know that that's going to be a Greek monument or a Greco-Egyptian monument, because the entire city of Alexandria was effectively set up by the Ptolemaic dynasty. The city of Rakotis or Rakadet that it used to be was just a small fishing district, and nothing really went on there. I don't think they have anything before the date of 1000 BC in terms of excavations in that area. But Alexandria itself is very much a Greek city, so when you consider the Serapeum of Alexandria, you know that's going to be a Greek monument. Now, as impressive as it is, there's a temple there and there's an underground library, I believe. When it comes to the Serapeum of Saqqara, I think we're talking about a whole different kettle of fish. This is in my opinion, much more impressive feat and a much more impressive site. And in many ways, I think it's actually a little bit unfair to call it the Serapeum, because the name Serapeum aligns it with the god Serapis, who was the ancient Greek version of the Egyptian god Apis or Api. So when people hear Serapeum, they think this is something that was maybe birthed or built during the Ptolemaic dynasty, and that's just simply not the case.
Saqqara is ancient Egypt's oldest and most sacred necropolis. For well over 3,000 years, it was a spiritual capital, home to temples, mastabas, tombs, and royal pyramids. Established in the Old Kingdom, the region saw continuous use as Lower Egypt's most significant royal site until well into the late period. Hidden beneath this landscape lies something different, and for me, something entirely unexpected. It wasn't quite a royal tomb, and it differed from a temple, but nonetheless, it was an equally impressive achievement. And in terms of scale and logistics, this underground complex is, in my humble opinion, on a par with the architectural brilliance of the pyramids themselves.
There are 24 coffin boxes, sarcophagi, that are contained within the catacombs of the Serapeum. Now, if I was to ask you how big are the largest granite blocks that are inside the Great Pyramid, some of you may know the answer. They range from about 25 to 80 tons. The 24 coffin boxes that are in the Serapeum range from 60 to 80 tons.
Bearing in mind that unlike the pyramid blocks used for construction, the Serapeum blocks were formed into boxes on site, Therefore, scientists have calculated the size of these transported blocks to be much larger, that is, up to 200 tons in weight. That's almost 3 times the weight of the heaviest pyramid blocks.
And they had the same transportation route, the same logistics. These were transported from 800 kilometers away in Aswan, which is 500 miles, all the way to Saqqara. These are humongous. So we're talking about around 2+ meters in height and width, with a depth of about 4 meters on average. The lids themselves sometimes are around 1 meter dense, and at least one of the 24 was found sealed shut. Now, it's at this point where we can start to look at the Serapeum as a little bit of an engineering feat or a bit of a marvel. So if you've got to consider the fact that they're transporting blocks that were essentially the same size as the largest blocks that were being transported during the Pyramid Golden Age, my instant question mark is, well, when were these blocks transported and when were they built? When were they carved? They look in size and shape almost identical to the kind of precision engineering that we're used to seeing inside the pyramids. And yet they're out here in these Saqqara tombs. It really does make little sense.
Mainstream Egyptologists agree that the Serapeum of Saqqara is a ritual necropolis dedicated to one of Egypt's most sacred creatures, the Apis bull. To the ancient Egyptians, the Apis, or Api, or Happy bull, was a living manifestation of Ptah, the creator god of Memphis. In terms of this bull's relationship to this great burial complex, the mainstream narrative goes something like this. When an Apis bull died, its death was treated with the same ritual importance as a pharaoh. The bull was embalmed, mummified, and entombed with ceremony. Over centuries, these burials accumulated, and they needed a resting place worthy of a god.
Now, what's also quite significant, certainly to the late period and certainly the ancient Greeks who came later, is Ptah being the supreme deity of Memphis, or Mennefer as it was known to the ancient Egyptians. The reason this is significant is because Memphis was situated essentially at the southern frontier, the southernmost border of Lower Egypt, or the Delta region. And the reason that's significant is because for many ancient Egyptian dynasties, Egypt represented only that portion of the land that is from the Delta to Memphis being the southernmost border. And that's essentially where we get the word Egypt from. Egypt comes from the phrase Hetkar Ptah, which became Egyptos, okay, Hetkar Ptah, and that essentially means house of the spirit of Ptah, which was essentially Memphis or Mennefer at its southernmost reaches. So that in itself is also quite significant in terms of the worship of Apis, who was the zoomorphication of the spirit of Ptah. Perhaps the reason why the worship of the Apis bull was so predominant in the Delta region, or the northern or lower Egypt portion of the land. Now, it's important here to distinguish the difference between happy and happy. Any of you who are somewhat schooled in the ancient Egyptian naming conventions and deities will know that the name Happy is the name that the ancient Egyptians had for the Nile. The Nile River was called Happy, and actually Happy was represented anthropomorphically as a human, a man with breasts. Interestingly enough, normally he was represented in steles which only showed one of his breasts, so there's clearly some kind of a spiritual kind of ontological significance as to why he was being represented in that manner. But actually, from what I can see, there's no relationship between Happy of the Nile and Happy, also known as Api, the bull deity. Now, we do know in ancient Egypt, they do like to do a lot of simile, wordplay, deliberate overlap between words, which shows some kind of etymological link to a deeper root concept. But on the surface, we've just got essentially two letters that have slightly different meanings.
Now, let's explore the official historical narrative for the Serapeum. The earliest Apis burials at Saqqara date back to around 1400 BCE, but the Serapeum as we know it, a vast system of interconnected tunnels, was expanded dramatically during the reign of Prince Kenwuset, son of Ramesses II, around 1250 BCE. Centuries later, during Egypt's late period and into the Ptolemaic era, the Serapeum grew into an enormous labyrinth. Over 1,400 years of sacred burials took place here. Today, visitors enter the section known as the Greater Vaults. This corridor stretches more than 300 meters through solid limestone bedrock. The atmosphere here is unlike anywhere else in Egypt. Every sound is swallowed by the weight of the stone around you. And then, one by one, they appear. I was almost stunned into silence by the sheer scale of these monoliths.
So you said there's 22?
Yeah.
22.
20, including 24, including the other side of the gate. Yeah.
24 colossal stone sarcophagi stand in these chambers. To carve a single box, ancient craftsmen cut it from a single block of granite, quarried more than 800 kilometers away in Aswan. And since we have evidence that these boxes were carved and finished in Saqqara, the entire block that was transported would have weighed up to an estimated 200 tons. Which begs the question, how did they transport these blocks, drag them into tunnels only slightly wider than the stones themselves, and lower them perfectly into position? Yes, we are asking the same questions we did regarding the construction of the pyramids, but thousands of years later, and regarding a complex that is barely mentioned outside of Egyptology.
Phenomenal. I just can't, and this granite, is it from Aswan?
Yeah, all of them from Aswan.
Aswan.
Yeah.
So transporting again, just...
Yeah, transport, composed from the Nile.
Yeah.
And the thing is, you need many teams. Because you need one team to choose the pole and another team to take the pole to the temple in the Memphis and here. We use special temple learning, and another team to cut these stones from Aswan. Another team to bring these stones from Aswan till here, and another team responsible for ceremony and celebrations. It's like too much work, too much business. And the high priest who is responsible for that place, sometimes his power exceeds the king himself, such as this one. Come down and have a look.
Yeah, sure.
Egyptologists agree. The logistics were staggering. And while we can propose methods, we don't yet fully understand how the Egyptians achieved this level of precision. The mainstream Egyptological view holds that these feats were achieved with a combination of wooden sledges, rope teams, sand lowering techniques, levers and ramps. But even with these tools, moving 200-ton granite blocks down a narrow rock-cut tunnel remains a feat of ingenuity. The surfaces are polished to a glass-like finish. The corners are perfectly square. Some lids are cut to fit so precisely that their precision baffles modern construction experts.
So each take time to finish it perfectly, to cut perfectly. Especially this one, it takes too much time to cut this one and divert it from here, from Aswan till here. So you can see even there, still need work.
I mean, talk to me. Wow. See, this makes my mind, because I'm looking at this and it just makes me think how.
Yeah.
You know?
But the thing is, inside, the hole inside, in the corner, it's perfectly made.
Yeah.
The angle with zero mistakes. Even no, zero mistakes exactly.
What kind of machine? I mean, I'm not one of these conspiracy theorists, but it's when I'm in front of it, it's hitting me more than when you just see it. You know, I'm looking how smooth this is, and even with these imperfections, I'm like, how? You know, this is as smooth as glass.
Yes.
It just makes my mind go to like, what? How did they do this, man?
That's why all the people are really admiring about these people and their civilization.
Yes. The official date for the first building of the Serapeum brings us back to about 1400 BC to the reign of Amenhotep III during the New Kingdom. Jumena, we're talking about over 1,000 years before the establishment of the Ptolemaic dynasty. But I would actually venture that the original date of the Serapeum might even be much older than that. If you want to know why, stay tuned.
For all its engineering complexity, today it's believed that the Serapeum's purpose was deeply religious. Every burial was recorded with a stela, listing regnal years, priests, and rituals performed. These stelae became crucial to building Egypt's historical timeline. It is these inscriptions that guide our modern interpretation of not only our dating of the architecture and tombs, but also the purpose of them. But, similar to contentions held around the purpose of the pyramids, there may be some room for further discourse.
It really doesn't make that much sense, but then it got me thinking. When it comes to the Serapeum is actually kind of split into different sections. As you can see on the diagram here, we have this area here which is called the lesser vaults. Now these lesser vaults are the vaults that were built by Amenhotep III and later contributed to by Ramesses II's son. Now the more impressive area is this area called the Greater Vaults, and apparently, allegedly, this Greater Vaults area began construction under the 26th dynasty. So this would be the late period under King Semitic or Pharaoh Semitic, and then it was later continued by the Ptolemaic dynasty and completed. So we're talking about a period of time spanning 1400 years when this is all taking place. But what's really interesting is that it's the Greater Vaults area that contains many of these blocks that in size, in shape, and in construction technique seem to match what was going on during the Pyramid Age. What makes this really interesting to me is that our identification of linking these with these later periods is purely due to the inscriptions that are on the boxes. These inscriptions don't really match the skill that was taken to create the boxes. So I'm inclined to believe that these inscriptions could be later additions. So then what conclusion does that lead one to? Well, here's a possibility that ran through my mind. What if the Greater Vaults was built during the Pyramid Age? Contemporaneous perhaps to the building of the pyramids. We have the location being Saqqara. We have the stones being transported from Aswan that are the same size and scope as the ones that are being used inside the pyramids. And then we have the later addition of New Kingdom pharaohs trying to contribute something to this complex, but perhaps not quite as good, which gives us the lesser vaults later. It's very rare, in fact, it's almost unseen in Egyptian history that things get better as time goes on. What you'll find is that the high period of construction and the high period of technology was actually the Old Kingdom. And then things kind of like just peter downwards little by little as they move away from that really prime golden age of technology. So it's just a thought that I had. What if the Greater Vaults area is actually the oldest part of this complex of catacombs, and the Lesser Vaults area was the newest part, and perhaps the dynasties that came later, the late period dynasties, contributed burials to the site, used the site, but utilized tombs and coffin boxes that were already there. It's a postulation, and I don't have much more than my gut feeling to support it, but it does make some sense.
Although since the New Kingdom we have been left the spiritual archive of the rituals around the cult of Apis, we can't be certain that this is the complete picture. The Serapeum was rediscovered in 1851 by French archaeologist Auguste Marriott. After clearing thousands of tons of debris, he found the sealed sarcophagi in perfect alignment, some still unopened. His discovery was so dramatic that it reshaped our understanding of sacred animal cults in Egypt.
So, as you can see on the screen, this is one of the many quote-unquote coffins or sarcophagus or whatever you want to call them that are found, tombs that are found in the Serapeum. You'll notice that this one has got a massive hole in it, and the reason this one has a hole in it is because this one was blown open using dynamite. It's believed that Marriott, the person who found the tomb back in the 1850s, was responsible for blowing this open, and that just raises a whole bunch of question marks as to why he was so intent on seeing what the contents of this coffin were. And what's really interesting is that it's been declared, and it's almost kind of unanimously agreed by archaeology, that these are coffins for the Apis bulls, or the happy bulls, which were essentially born alongside the kings, and when one died they were replaced with another, and they had a very significant part of the ancient Egyptian spiritual tradition. At least that's what was sold. The problem being that no remains or mummified remains of bulls have been found inside any of these alleged tombs, and they are humongous. So some have argued, well, you needed a massive tomb because the bulls are big, but I don't know any 4-meter long bulls. And what you'll find as you kind of look at more of these tombs, or you see them, is that none of them really are directly inscribed, and those inscriptions look like they were made after the fact. So we have all of these peculiarities and anomalies. So he was expecting a surprise, but if it's already been agreed that it's just bulls' remains, excuse the pun, that are inside them, then he wouldn't have been that keen to blow it open with dynamite. And allegedly, when he blew it open, it was empty. But they were able to attain, there's a lot they were able to ascertain from these. They were vacuum sealed, all of them, which was interesting enough. The fire from a lamp to ensure that these were vacuum sealed. But the question is, what role did these play?
You know the serif? Yeah. The serif. It should be the king name, but nothing. Okay. Even the cartouche. Empty. Nothing. And the writing here is like scratch on the surface.
Yeah, I was about to say that. This doesn't look very... Yes. It's very shallow.
Yes. So the thing is, it shows that the priest, he was more powerful than the king. Because maybe the bull did suddenly, and the king was approved. So the high priest, he said, yeah, we just want to celebrate. It's a business, and we don't need to stop it. So they already celebrate, and they make the ceremony, and they buried the bull. That's why the cartouche is empty, and there also on the other side, the cartouche and the serif is empty, and they finish this one in a hurry, because you can see this part is still need work. So I said, just polish on it and finish, because we need to celebrate. And here you can see the door of the temple, see, and the locks, the locket, and the false door, and even from the other side.
It's wild that they do. If you look at how well this stone is finished, polished, transported, and then they just do such a quick job with the hieroglyphs.
Yes.
Seems crazy, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Having independently researched for what is now years, I have focused my time almost exclusively on artwork. In particular, the stone sculptures and steles of ancient Egypt, including the ancient art of communication through their sacred language of the Medu Neter, more commonly known as hieroglyphs. One of the skills I have developed is being able to quickly identify original hieroglyphs versus later hieroglyphs, which are normally linked to iconoclasm and reattribution. In the case of the markings on the Serapeum boxes, I was quickly and easily able to identify what was almost certainly a later carving or reattribution. In my humble opinion, these markings cannot be used as primary evidence of authorship for the Serapeum monoliths.
I think one of the most, I'm not going to say laughable, but definitely questionable things that I raised with the Egyptologist to show me the box with the very scrappy hieroglyphs on it. You know, that's my first question. I was like, these hieroglyphs definitely do not match the precision engineering that was used to create this box. And you can find hieroglyphs that are far more impressive, such as, you know, if you look at the hieroglyphs that are on any of the obelisks that you find across Europe that were taken from ancient Egypt, that the hieroglyphs on there are precision. They look like they were made by a machine. They are very impressive. And yet you got these ones that are just literally surface level hieroglyphs. And you said, oh, well, they were in a rush. I was like, oh, a rush from where? This box clearly must have taken 10 years to make if you're talking about your manual levels of kind of like, you know, chiseling and hammering down. This box would have taken 10 years to make. So why would they have suddenly rushed the easiest part, which would have been engraving it with hieroglyphs? Surely you would have got your most skilled hieroglyphic artisan to come and put in, you know, medunetta to the highest quality, and yet you have this kind of like rushed. So there's a huge question mark about this, the presentation of this entire complex. What I was staring at in terms of the precision, in terms of technology, in terms of the engineering capabilities of the people who created these boxes and then transported them to this underground complex, I knew instantly this is Pyramid Age. This has got nothing to do with the later kingdoms, even the New Kingdom. These are Pyramid Age, and someone's attempted to attribute this to dynasties, later dynasties that really don't have anything else that's even close or near comparable to this kind of capability. Certainly the Ptolemaic and the later Roman dynasties didn't show any kind of capability for working, transporting such large pieces of stone. So definitely there was a big question mark in my mind, and that was enough for me to say this warrants further investigation. I think this definitely warrants further investigation.
Amazing. Wow. Yeah, it's just amazing. It's just this is just it's just crazy. Yeah, it's just
so
like
it's finished.
I'm just looking at the finish. Yeah, it's just this is I don't understand how none of it makes sense. Because even me, I'm one of these people. I'm very simplistic. I'm like, look, if the experts say they used hand tools and this, that, and the other, I'll be like, that's what the experts say.
Yeah.
And I've seen the process, but. Man, I'm in construction. I know how hard this would be to make.
Yes, actually.
It would take 1,000,000 years with hand tools to get it this smooth, man.
Yeah.
And this straight, and that's flat. It's just.
This is even every visit to come to this place. It's a blow in my mind too, because just imagine these people how they look like.
Some parts of the box are kind of like wavy, in that they didn't cut them entirely straight. But what's really peculiar is even the wavy parts are polished smooth as glass. So it ends up looking like this thing was created in a mold. Granite, which is one of the hardest stones known to man. How you get a piece of stone that hard, that smooth, is beyond me. And I think it'll be beyond most engineers in this modern day as to how they did that without modern tools. Stepping aside from the whole argument and debate about whether or not they were able to cut stones, and people talking about the fact that iron is useless against hard rocks, and then they said, well, they used other rocks to cut them. Putting that all aside, let's talk about the finishing here, because these things are finished to modern engineering precision. They are polished, smooth as glass, smooth as your marble floors. And this is a gigantic, colossal block that's sitting in a underground in a tomb and transported down a corridor that it shouldn't have fit down. We have to start being, at least in my view, a little bit more pragmatic about what could be taking place. When I say pragmatic, I don't mean logical based on the Egyptological narratives. I mean pragmatic about likely usage of 24, 25 including the unfinished one, but 24 precision cut granite boxes transported from 500 miles away at the highest weight, weighing around 200 tons, because we know that the working was done on site, and we have evidence of that in that we have the unfinished box in the Serapeum, transported underground into this underground complex and placed into vaults, each one placed into its own vault, and some of these vaults only allowing for 2 feet in terms of working room. That's like 1 feet on each side. That's how tight some of these rooms are. And yet we're to believe that these giant blocks were then worked on underground. So you're in this dark environment with no ventilation underground, chiseling manually, and it would have to be literally hundreds of people to get these blocks chiseled to these perfect precision right angle, perfect 90-degree right angles inside and outside of these blocks. Nothing about this story makes any sense. Now, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I would certainly jump on the idea that this requires further exploration. Personally, I'm not satisfied with the Apis bull burial explanation. I think the only evidence we have for them being the burial place for the Apis bulls, it's to do with the fact that we have this parade of Apis steles, which have been since removed from the walls. So the idea that these Apis bulls would be given a more elaborate burial than the monarch, the ruling monarch, seems really far-fetched to me. And we're not talking about a little bit greater, we're talking about much more so. We're talking about gigantic, 4+ meter boxes carved to perfection and planed and smoothed to the consistency of glass. There's definitely something that's not being conveyed in terms of what the purpose of these boxes are. And I think that's because perhaps most Egyptologists have no idea what these boxes are, what their purpose was. And in essence, we've kind of just landed on the most logical explanation.
Standing here, the weight of history is overwhelming. The granite absorbs sound, the darkness feels ancient. You can sense the magnitude of the effort poured into this place. It forces us to ask, what kind of civilization commits this level of engineering, artistry, and labor to honor a single animal? The Serapeum of Saqqara remains one of the greatest hidden wonders of ancient Egypt, an underground masterpiece of devotion, engineering, and mystery. And even today it stands as a reminder that our ancestors of the ancient world accomplished more than we often imagine, and in my view, way beyond what we still fully understand. Egyptology, as it always does, will continue to proclaim without trepidation that there is no mystery to be deciphered. We have translated and understood all there is to understand. But Marriott's empty, untouched sarcophagus should act as a stern reminder that such proclamations are nothing more than mere boasts, with little evidence to support them. Whether the Serapeum was a tomb, factory, or a workshop, one thing is for sure. It's most certainly a very impressive mystery. Thank you for joining me beneath the sands. This is the hidden wonder of Saqqara.
I think Egyptologists may have it wrong. Now, do I have an answer or even a proposition as to what these massive engineering projects were and what these boxes were used for? I haven't got the foggiest clue. Some people have speculated they could be batteries. Others have speculated they could be energy or radiation generation. Some people have speculated that these were built before the Great Flood. I don't have any of those ideas or speculations. All I know, or at least all I can present to you, is what my spidey senses presented me when I went to the Serapeum and I saw these boxes. I went there with no expectations and no understanding of what they were, and instantly I was like, no, these are pyramid age. When the pyramid age was, I can't tell you that either. Obviously on an Egyptological level, it's kind of understood or accepted that you're looking at 3rd or 4th dynasty for Egypt's great pyramid building age, if you believe and you accept that, which is fine. But all I knew is that I'm going to be honest, I don't accept the narrative that's been given. I think the narrative is very incomplete and lacks an explanation for virtually everything, none of them actually containing Apis bull remains, and therefore we can cast aside this idea that it's an Apis bull burial ground. Because what were tomb raiders doing, raiding the mummified corpses of Apis bulls? You know, that's essentially worthless. And you could argue the same thing for the alleged boxes that are in the pyramids that have been called the tombs or the coffins of the pharaohs that built them. We didn't find the pharaoh's remains in there, but who would loot the remains of a pharaoh? We didn't see any of the inscriptions that we'd assign. So we've got this very similar trend and trait. And I think, well, to be clear and transparent, I think there's something going on. I would love to know what it was. My spidey sense is tingling about a few things, but you guys know me, I can't really or wouldn't really do the injustice of speculating until I had some stronger evidence. So at least, yeah, that's my insights into the Serapeum of Saqqara, a very unexpected but very pleasantly unexpected and exciting sight in terms of the archaeological history of ancient Egypt. It just blows my mind and opens up entirely new dialogues, arguments and areas of investigation that I would love to get further into. Just to inform you guys that less than 40% of my regular viewers are actually subscribed to my channel. So if you're a regular viewer or you're viewing this for the first time but you like my style of presentation and you like the research that I've carried out, please feel free to hit that subscribe button. Those of you who are already subscribers, please feel free to join my Patreon and join these list of immense people who you can see running down the screen somewhere, one side or the other. I'm not sure which side I'm going to put it on. These immense people, my production team, who have just carried me through my YouTube membership core. They are amazing, and you guys really do not understand how much I rely on your belief at the moment. Also playing in the background at the moment is a track that I'm releasing, so if you like the sound of saving the world, it's be available for streaming, so feel free to listen to that. Even just listening to that music is supporting the channel. Those of you who have already invested in my book Reconstructing Egypt, it's on its way, it's still being written. I'm going to start sharing chapters with you guys on this channel as soon as possible. Well, what can I say? I'm just very, very grateful that you've tuned in, and I hope you found it informative. I hope you are as intrigued by the Serapeum of Saqqara as I was. For me personally, it was a highlight of my trip, and I wasn't even aware that it existed before I left to go to Egypt. But when I got there, having seen the pyramids, been to all the museums, the highlight of my trip was the Serapeum, because it just had my mind racing in all kinds of directions. So if you like the video, like I said, hit the like up, make sure you're subscribed, feel free to stream my music, and thank you to all my patrons and my YouTube members, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.
Of the status quo where black folk lack the most. From rags to bold, show I'm passionate to crack the code and crack the skull of your coat where your crossbones meet. We ain't the same as those past generations be.